Skin Hero shares the story.
When I was 9, my school felt enormous and confusing. Long hallways echoed even when nobody walked through them. Most kids avoided the old south stairwell near the gym. Teachers said it was rarely used because of broken tiles, but every student whispered different stories about strange noises inside. I never believed them until one late afternoon alone. My mom worked late, so I stayed for after-school tutoring. One evening, my tutor left early for an unexpected appointment. She told me to wait in the lobby for pickup. I packed my backpack and started walking downstairs carefully. Halfway down the main hall, I heard something metallic echoing. It sounded like a chair scraping across an empty floor. The noise came from the old south stairwell behind me. I turned slowly, not wanting to acknowledge the sound fully. The stairwell door was slightly open, even though always locked. A thin strip of darkness spilled across the hallway floor. Inside, I heard slow breathing, steady like someone concentrating deeply. Not panicked breathing, not rushed, but calm and controlled. I stepped backward quietly, trying not to disturb anything nearby. Then a shape moved behind the stairwell door very slowly. A tall silhouette leaned forward, just enough to be visible. He wasn't a kid, and he wasn't a teacher clearly. The figure stood completely still, except for shallow, rhythmic breathing. His head angled downward, like he watched me through eyelashes. I froze, gripping my backpack straps as hard as possible. The man took one slow step toward the doorframe silently. His foot dragged slightly, scraping something across the concrete floor. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out at all. He took another step, placing his hand on the metal railing. Long fingers curled around the bar, like he practiced the motion. I backed away further, keeping my eyes locked on him. The stairwell lights flickered once, revealing more unsettling details. The man wore no shoes and had dirt on his clothes. His shirt was torn down the sleeve, exposing a bruise. He looked like someone who shouldn't be anywhere near children. When the light flickered again, he moved closer instantly. The door creaked open wider as he stepped into the hallway. He didn't speak or blink, just stared with hollowed eyes. I turned and sprinted toward the lobby as fast as possible. My footsteps echoed loudly, sounding too slow for my fear. Behind me, I heard the stairwell door slam shut violently. Then silence filled the hallway again, heavy and suffocating. I burst into the main lobby, shaking uncontrollably with fear. The secretary looked confused and asked what had happened. Before I could answer, the janitor walked down the hallway. He said he just locked the south stairwell door moments earlier. He insisted nobody was inside because he checked thoroughly today. I told him someone definitely stood there watching me silently. He returned with me to check, unlocking the heavy door. The stairwell was empty, cold, and smelled like damp concrete. But dirt footprints covered 3 steps, leading downward into darkness. The prints were bare, long, and fresh enough to smear. The janitor looked nervous, but told me it was probably nothing. He locked the door again and told me to forget everything. I never walked near that hallway again during my remaining years. Whenever I think about childhood fear, that stairwell returns instantly, and sometimes I still hear slow breathing when hallways fall silent.
Second story.
When I was 8, my bedroom felt normal during daytime, but at night the closet always changed its entire atmosphere. The air inside seemed heavier, colder, and strangely still. My parents said I imagined things like most children often do, but the fear felt too sharp and too specific nightly. The closet had old sliding wooden doors that scraped loudly. Whenever I opened them, dust floated out in thin clouds. Shelves were filled with boxes, coats, and forgotten childhood items. Everything looked harmless when sunlight lit the entire room, but darkness made each object feel wrong in subtle ways. One evening I heard faint tapping coming from the closet. The sound repeated slowly, like a knuckle brushing wooden panels. I froze in bed, watching the closed doors without blinking. I whispered for my mom, but she didn't hear anything. The tapping stopped once I hid completely beneath the blanket. The next night I heard something worse than quiet tapping. Soft breathing came from inside, long and slow in rhythm. Not shallow breathing, not wind, something steady and intentional. It sounded like someone trying to stay quiet inside there. I lay still, unable to speak or move in fear. The breathing always stopped when footsteps passed the hallway outside. As soon as silence returned, the breathing started again slowly. My parents said wooden houses made strange noises at night, but the sounds always came directly from behind the closet doors. Never from the floorboards, never from the hallway walls. I kept my lamp on, hoping light would stop the noises. But even with light, the closet felt strangely occupied at night. Shadows shifted differently inside the narrow gap between doors. Something moved behind them, slow and careful, almost thoughtful. I began sleeping curled up, facing away from the closet. One Thursday night, the doors finally moved on their own. They slid a few centimeters outward, creaking the entire time. Cold air drifted from inside, brushing across my bedroom floor. I whispered, "Go away," without thinking, hoping it might stop. The breathing grew louder, slow, heavy, and completely deliberate. Then a voice came through the small opening between doors. It sounded older, strained, and far too calm for comfort. It said 4 words softly, almost like stating simple fact. "I'm sitting in here." I fell off my bed, scrambling backward across the carpeted floor. My parents rushed in after hearing the noise and shouting. They turned the lights on, exposing the closet completely again. The doors were closed when they entered, though slightly misaligned. My dad opened them and checked each section very thoroughly. Boxes and coats were untouched, exactly where they always were. However, the floor showed something deeply unsettling that night. A faint circular mark appeared in the dust near the corner. Not footprints, something shaped like someone sitting cross-legged. It looked like weight pressed the floor there for many hours. My parents said I probably moved things accidentally earlier that day. The noises continued almost every night for several more weeks. One night the doors slid open completely while I was awake. Inside I saw a tall shape crouched low near the shelves. Its knees lifted high, head bowed, body pressed tightly together. The shape raised its head slightly, revealing dark, empty eyes. I screamed until my throat ached, and my parents arrived quickly. When they turned on the lights, the closet was empty again. No footprints, no marks, nothing disturbed inside the closet. We moved my bed into another room the following morning. The noises stopped instantly once I left that bedroom. I still feel uneasy around closets, even as an adult now. Sometimes I remember that voice whispering from the darkness softly, and sometimes I think about something sitting quietly behind doors.
That Second story.
When I was 10, our house had an old basement. It smelled like damp wood, rusted pipes, and forgotten cardboard boxes. My parents used it mostly for storage and winter decorations. I hated going down there, even during bright sunny afternoons. The single basement window always made me feel uncomfortable inside. The window was small, rectangular, and placed near the ceiling. It faced our backyard and sat slightly above ground level. Light barely entered through it, leaving everything dimly lit. Every time I looked at that window, I felt watched, like something waited on the other side, crouched and silent. One Saturday afternoon, my mom asked me to get candles. They were stored in a plastic bin beside the basement stairs. I ran down quickly, trying not to breathe too deeply. The air always felt heavier the further I stepped inside. I grabbed the bin and turned toward the stairs again. Then something tapped on the basement window behind me. Not a branch, not a sound from outside normally. A clear knuckle tap, deliberate and perfectly timed. I froze instantly, gripping the bin tightly with both hands. The window sat behind me, but I refused to turn. Another tap followed, slower and louder than the first. A third tap came next, dragging slightly across the glass. I forced myself to turn and look toward the window. A pale face pressed against the glass from the outside. Eyes wide, unblinking, staring directly down into the basement. The face didn't move, didn't blink, didn't change expression, just stared silently with a strange, tight smile forming. The window stood too high for a normal person standing. Whoever pressed their face there had to crouch unnaturally. The smile widened slowly, stretching across a rigid jaw. I dropped the bin and sprinted up the stairs immediately. My mom asked why I looked pale and terrified suddenly. I told her someone looked through the basement window downstairs. My dad checked the yard and said no one was there. No footprints, no disturbed dirt, nothing on the window frame. That night I avoided the basement completely, staying upstairs. But around 11 p.m. I heard tapping again downstairs. 3 slow taps echoed through the floorboards beneath my room. I covered my ears, praying they would stop eventually. The tapping grew louder, like someone trying different rhythms. My dad went downstairs with a flashlight to investigate. He called my name after 2 minutes, asking me to come. I refused, but he insisted I needed to see something. I slowly walked down the stairs, shaking the entire time. He pointed the flashlight at the basement window carefully. A smear mark stretched across the glass from outside. A long streak shaped like a forehead sliding sideways slowly. It was too high for a normal person to reach naturally. My dad said maybe a raccoon smudged the window earlier. But raccoons don't press human faces against basement windows. For the next several weeks, tapping continued sporadically at night. Sometimes quiet, sometimes slow, sometimes right beneath my feet. No one else heard the pattern clearly except for me. Eventually, my parents replaced the window and sealed the frame. The noises stopped completely after the replacement installation, but I still remember the pale face staring inside silently, and I still wonder how it reached the window so easily.
Story 4.
When I was 11, we lived on a quiet cul-de-sac. Every house looked similar, with trimmed lawns and plain fences. Most neighbors kept to themselves and rarely talked to children. But one neighbor made everyone feel uneasy without saying anything. His name was Mr. Corwin, and he lived 3 houses down. He always stood outside at strange hours of the night, not smoking, not working, just standing completely motionless, alone. My parents said he was harmless but a little strange. Kids in the neighborhood avoided walking past his house deliberately. He never smiled, waved, or even acknowledged anyone passing. One evening I rode my bike around the cul-de-sac repeatedly. The sun had almost set, turning everything dim and orange. As I passed his driveway, I noticed him standing outside. He wasn't facing the street like usual, but facing me. His head tilted slightly, following my movement as I biked. I tried ignoring him, but my stomach tightened uncomfortably. Each lap I made, he shifted position very subtly. Not walking, not stepping, just gradually turning his body. By my 5th lap, he stood directly at the driveway center. His eyes locked on me, expression blank and deeply unsettling. I stopped biking and pretended to check my shoelaces nervously. He didn't move, didn't blink, just kept staring silently. I forced myself to ride home without looking back again. My parents brushed it off, saying adults behave oddly sometimes. But that night I struggled to fall asleep from anxiety. Around 1 a.m. I woke to a faint tapping noise. At first I thought it came from the window beside me, but the sound came from farther away, the driveway outside. I moved the curtain slightly and peeked into the darkness. Mr. Corwin stood in our driveway, staring directly at our house. He stood perfectly still, hands at his sides, shoulders stiffened, his head angled upward as if looking into the windows. I dropped the curtain instantly and backed away from it. My heart pounded so hard I felt it shaking my ribs. I woke my dad and said someone was in our driveway. He checked outside but saw only an empty driveway. No footprints, no movement, nothing unusual in the yard. I insisted I saw him standing there moments earlier. My dad said I probably had a nightmare from stress, but I knew what I saw and how real it felt. The next morning I avoided looking toward his house completely. But when we drove to school, I saw him standing outside. He stood still again in the exact same pose, staring. Not at us, at our driveway, like studying the ground. My mom whispered softly that he must be unwell somehow. That week I saw him outside nearly every single night. Always silent, always motionless, always staring toward our house. Sometimes I saw him from my bedroom window around midnight. Other times he stood near the cul-de-sac entrance watching quietly. Nobody else seemed to notice him unless I mentioned it. One night heavy rain started pounding on roofs and pavement. I assumed he would finally stay inside during harsh weather, but around 3 a.m. I glanced outside by pure habit. He stood in the middle of our driveway again, completely soaked. Rain poured over him, but he didn't react at all. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face in perfect detail, briefly. His eyes were wide open, unblinking, fixed directly on me. Not the house, me, specifically standing behind the curtain. I jumped back instantly, pulling the curtain shut with force. When I looked again, he was no longer in the driveway. The next morning we learned something unsettling from another neighbor. She said Mr. Corwin had moved away 3 weeks earlier. He hadn't been living in that house for almost a month, but I had seen him outside nearly every night this week, staring at our driveway, staring at our windows, staring at me. I never told anyone else what I saw after hearing that, but sometimes at night I feel someone watching from the street, and sometimes I see a figure standing exactly where he stood.
Story 5.
When I was 7, there was a small playground nearby. It sat behind our elementary school, fenced by tall metal bars. Kids played there every afternoon while waiting for their parents. Teachers supervised us loosely, chatting at the far picnic tables. I usually stayed near the swings because crowds overwhelmed me easily. One afternoon I noticed a woman standing behind the back fence. She wore a long coat and had messy shoulder-length hair. She wasn't close to the bars, just standing several steps away. At first, she looked like any parent waiting for someone, but she didn't move, speak, or look toward any children. She stared directly at me with a strange, narrow expression. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, and too focused on me. I avoided eye contact and pretended to tie my shoe. When I glanced again, she hadn't changed position at all. Same posture, same stare, same unsettling tilt of her head. The next day, she stood there again at the exact time. Same place, same distance, same fixed expression on her face. This time she was closer to the fence, leaning slightly forward. No other kids seemed to notice her presence behind us. I felt watched the entire time, like prey under observation. On the third day, I pointed her out to my friend. He looked confused and asked where the woman was standing. He claimed nobody was behind the fence that afternoon. I insisted she was there, staring directly at us both. When I looked back, she had moved even closer again. Her hands gripped two metal bars tightly, knuckles turning white. Her head pressed between the bars, almost touching the playground. I ran to the teachers, telling them someone was watching. They checked but said the space behind the fence was empty. One teacher even walked the perimeter and found nothing unusual. That night I couldn't sleep, thinking about her staring silently. I kept imagining her hands gripping those bars, pulling inward. The next morning I begged my mom to drive me instead, but she insisted walking was healthy and perfectly safe daily. So I walked alone, terrified she might appear somewhere nearby. When school ended, I refused to go near the playground area, but curiosity dragged me toward the fence, despite heavy fear. I peeked through the bars and saw something deeply unsettling. Footprints in the dirt, barefoot, small, and facing the fence. They formed a perfect line leading from the woods to here. I backed away slowly, scanning the trees for any movement. A soft rustling came from deeper inside the forest area. It wasn't wind, it was rhythmic, like someone pacing repeatedly. I ran back to the pickup lane and waited for my mom. But even in the crowded area, I felt watched intensely. For several days, she didn't appear again behind the fence. I convinced myself it was imagination or childish misunderstanding. Then one evening my mom asked why I looked so jumpy. I said nothing, but she insisted I answer honestly tonight. In silence, she told me something she had hidden previously. 3 months earlier, a woman had gone missing near the school. She lived alone, struggled with mental illness, and wandered frequently. People reported seeing her staring at children from wooded areas. Search teams never found her body, despite extensive efforts. My mom said she didn't tell me earlier to avoid fear. I didn't sleep for 2 days after hearing that information. Each shadow looked like her coat, each sound her footsteps nearby. I never saw her again, at least not clearly or up close. But sometimes I wake at night, feeling a stare through windows. And sometimes I imagine hands gripping metal bars patiently again. Thank you for listening to this story. If anything similar ever happened to you when you were a kid, tell me in the comments. Your experience might help someone else feel less alone with their memories. Your like and your comment help this channel grow in the dark. And if you want more true horror every week, make sure you subscribe. If you haven't seen the previous video yet, 5 True Camping Horror Stories, watch it next. It's colder, more atmospheric, and one of the stories might stay with you longer than you expect. Stay safe tonight.